Hi, and welcome to the Millennium Bible Institute's School of Biblical Archaeology. I'm your instructor, Aaron Judkins, and I'm a biblical archaeologist and adjunct professor for the Millennium Bible Institute. The purpose of this course is to provide you with an understanding of the archaeological evidence and how it supports the historical veracity of the Bible. Upon successful completion of this course, you should be able to have a basic understanding of the purpose and history of biblical archaeology. You should have a basic understanding of the relevance of archaeology to the Bible. You'll be able to discuss the archaeological evidence that supports the historical claims of the Bible and the implications of some of the most important discoveries ever made. There is one textbook requirement for this course. That is a book by Dr. Clifford Wilson entitled The Stones Still Shout. Now, we have that book available at MBI. If you don't have that book or the comprehensive set of notes that goes along with this study, then contact MBI at www.graceage.org or contact me directly through my website at www.aaronjudkins.com, and we'll be glad to get that material in your hands. You should have some supplemental material in your notes that will help you along as you study. There is some recommended text and some magazines and articles for you to subscribe to. I hope that you would do so in order to further you along in your studies of biblical archaeology. If you're interested in becoming a student at MBI, please contact them at the website below, and they'll be able to give you that information on how to become a student and take this course or any other courses they have at the School of Theology, School of Biblical Studies, or the School of Eschatology for course credit. Now, if you're not a student and you just want to take this as your own personal study, not for credit, then that's fine too. Maybe you're another student from another school and you want to take this course to help further you along in your studies and your goals. That's fine too, and we're glad that you're able to be a part of this. Let other people know if you're interested in this, and pass this information on to your friends and to your family. Now we'll go ahead and begin the introduction to the course of biblical archaeology. Over the last 200 years, we have witnessed the birth and the growth and the phenomenal development of the field of biblical archaeology. This science has performed many wonders in furnishing the background material and in illuminating, in many cases, authenticating the Bible. No field of research has offered a greater challenge than that of biblical archaeology. Now, up to the beginning of the 19th century, very little was known of the Bible times or the culture, except for what appeared in the Scripture. The reason for this is that the Greek and Latin historians didn't write down very much information before the 5th century BC, and so very little was known outside of the Bible itself. One can imagine the excitement that was stirred among scholars and serious Bible students with the discoveries and illumination of the Bible lands from the 19th century on to the present. Artifacts have been lying around for thousands of years and buried in the sands of time until the field of biblical archaeology came around. The discipline of this field may be defined as a study based on the excavations, decipherment, and critical evaluation of the records of the past as they pertain to the Bible. While the general field of archaeology is fascinating, it's much more fun to study biblical archaeology since it deals with the Bible and the history of the Bible lands. This is the reason for the growing enthusiasm of biblical archaeology. Now, there are those who don't like to use the term biblical archaeology, ranging from the secular scholars to even some biblical theologians. You'll hear them use the term Near Eastern archaeology instead. Now, the reason for this is because they like to minimize the history of the Bible. But the Scriptures are the inspired revelation of God to man and illustrates that the Bible has important historical background. And thus I propose in this course to put the Bible back into biblical archaeology. Also, this field has a worthy ministry of expanding your knowledge of Bible history. The word archaeology consists of two Greek words, archaeos meaning ancient and logos meaning word or study. Biblical archaeology, then, is a study of archaeological data relating to the Old and or New Testaments. In the realm of literature, the Christian Bible has had an impact beyond the cultural and national boundaries in which it was first presented. Now, not everyone has accepted the Bible as God's revealed word, nor have some Christians who have approached the Bible. Yes, they have minimized the historical events, especially in Genesis and in other Old Testament books. It is important to note that from the 19th century that the Bible has been under attack in its history and theology. Some rightly declared that the Bible has been unhistorical, shrouded in mythology, and replete with legend. Others just outwardly wish to maintain that the history of the Bible is very minimal at best. It is important to lay the foundation here for this course that I believe that the Bible is the final authority for all matters of faith and practice. I take it for what it says, not what I think it means. The Bible is not merely a history textbook or a guide. It is God's revelation of Himself in written form to man. It is God's Word. Does archaeology prove the Bible? We can't say that archaeology proves the Bible. In fact, that claim would be putting archaeology above the Bible. Archaeology is the support, not the main foundation. Very often archaeology does endorse particular Bible events. Some would say that it would in this way prove the Bible, but such a statement should be taken with reservation. There are many thousands of facts in the Bible that are just not capable of empirical verification because the evidence has long since been lost. However, it is remarkable that when there is confirmation and new evidence has come to light, the Bible stands investigation in ways that are unique in all of literature. Its superiority to attack, its capacity to withstand criticism, its amazing facility to be proved right, after all, are staggering by any standards of scholarship. The superiority of Genesis 1 through 11 has been established, and the patriarchal backgrounds have been endorsed. The writings of Moses, and from his times, and the record of the conquest of Canaan under Joshua, has many indications of eyewitness recording. The Syrian period has given dramatic confirmation to biblical records, with palace after palace excavated over the last 150 years, and constantly adding to our understanding of the background to Old Testament kings and prophets, peoples, and the local color of the culture. Kings and rulers and officials are named, titles are given with remarkable accuracy, geographical boundaries are highlighted, and customs are correctly touched on. It is indeed true that the truth has sprung out of the earth, according to Psalm 85:11. In recent years, many biblical archaeologists have abandoned their long-held biblical historical approach and exchanged for a secular view. Some even insist that the Bible should no longer be the focus of the discipline. Many academics now like to call themselves Near Eastern archaeologists or Palestinian archaeologists, thereby disassociating themselves from any biblical ties to their research. Archaeologists who consider biblical scriptures to be legitimate historical documents have been attacked by the mainstream. Now, this led to a definitive split between the biblical archaeologist and what was then called Syro-Palestinian archaeologist in the 1970s and continues today. This debate is usually articulated between biblical maximalist, who assumes that the Bible is historically correct, and the biblical minimalist, who assumes that the Bible is mostly myth. Today, it is a fact that the history of the ancient world is evolutionary in nature and embraces large periods of time for the history of mankind, and is ultimately in contradiction to the biblical record. Three factors have contributed to minimizing the historical value of the Bible. The first is the acceptance of the theory of evolution. The concept of long ages of man, based on their technology, is a pure evolutionary hypothesis, and is not only based off of Charles Darwin's Origins of Man, it is based off the work of one C.J. Thompson of Denmark. The second factor that influences the chronology in archaeology is the acceptance of Manetho's King's List. It is clear that Egypt has claimed a vast age for its antiquity. The history of Egypt, as proposed by Manetho, has many issues, and the timeline is very questionable when understood that even the Egyptologists themselves acknowledge that this has not been proven. We'll get into more of that as we discuss the archaeology in Egypt. However, the history of Egypt, as proposed by Manetho, has essentially been adopted by modern archaeologists as being correct. Despite the fragmented history of Egypt, archaeologists persist in using it as a measuring stick for the dating of the ancient world. The third factor responsible for the presently held evolutionary chronology and humanist philosophy is the documentary hypothesis. Now, this assumes that the Bible documents of the Old Testament are written late and gelled together by editors from numerous former documents in a piecemeal-like manner to assert and invent the history of ancient Israel. This documentary hypothesis, or otherwise known as J.E.D.P theory, assumes the following. 1. It assumes many different oral and written traditions handed down from generation to generation from different sources. 2. It assumes that the history of the nation of Israel beyond the days of David cannot be accurately gauged from the internal statements of the Bible. In earlier days, this was extended to the times of the kings, but modern evidence has fully upheld the narratives and the chronology of the Hebrew kings and almost universally accepted an incredible degree of accuracy of Bible chronology. Now, a great authority on this is the Professor Edwin Thiele, whose major presentation and work was entitled The Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings, and has to a large extent put the question of the authority of the chronology of the Hebrew kings in the Bible. 3. This theory assumes at least 4 major sources for the documents of the Bible. Now, in your notes, you can see those listed out. I won't go into those here. Just know that these are the pieces of documents that have been sorted together and editorialized and then finalized to complete the volume of the books. Given these 3 factors, the theory of evolution, Manetho's King's List, and the documentary hypothesis, it is now easy to understand why evolutionary chronology has taken over biblical archaeology. Next, we'll look at the history in biblical archaeology. Now we're looking at the history of biblical archaeology. But there are three prominent historical figures that I want to introduce to you that paved the way and the foundations for biblical archaeology specifically. The first man is William Flinders Petrie, born in 1853, and he is called the father of archaeology. He was an English Egyptologist and a pioneer of systematic methodology in archaeology. He was a very meticulous excavator and kept detailed records, what is the foundation now for modern archaeological recording. He held the first chair of Egyptology in the United Kingdom and excavated at many of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt. For 40 years, Flinders explored and excavated over 30 sites in the Middle East. Of his most famous finds was the Stela of Merneptah at Thebes. And we'll learn more about that as you study this course. His work in Egypt developed the concept of seriation, which permitted dating long before scientific methods were available to corroborate his chronologies. Although he was really self-taught and had no formal training, he wrote over 100 books and nearly 900 articles and reviews. One of his most important works was entitled The Methods and Aims of Archaeology, published in 1904. The second man that we'll talk about is Sir Charles Leonard Woolley, born in 1880. He was a British archaeologist best known for his excavations at Ur in Mesopotamia. He is considered to be one of the first modern biblical archaeologists. His excavation at the ancient Sumerian city of Ur greatly advanced knowledge of ancient Mesopotamian civilization. His discovery of geological evidence of the Great Flood suggested that the correlation with the biblical record in Genesis was accurate after all. He conducted principal excavations of the Hittite city of Carchemish in northern Syria, and worked at Tel El Armada, capital of the Egyptian king Akhenaten. His excavations at Ur, conducted for the British Museum, London, and the University of Pennsylvania, enabled scholars to trace the history of the city from its final days during the 4th century BC. His findings revealed much about everyday life in what has now come to be called the cradle of civilization. One of his most dramatic discoveries was the royal tombs dating to 2700 BC and disclosed the practice of sacrificial burial of deceased kings' personal items. With the help of contributors, he began to publish a projected 10 volumes of the excavations at Ur in 1927. His other works include the Sumerians and the Ur of the Chaldees and Digging Up the Past in 1930. The third person we'll talk about is William Foxwell Albright, born in 1891. He was an American archaeologist, biblical scholar, linguist, and an expert on ceramics. From the early 20th century until his death, he was the dean of biblical archaeologists and universally acknowledged as the founder of modern biblical archaeology. Albright became known to the public best for his role in the authentication of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1948. Although he was primarily a biblical archaeologist, Albright made contributions in almost every field of Near Eastern studies. He was a prolific author. His major works include Yahweh and the Gods of Canaan, the Archaeology of Palestine from the Stone Age to Christianity, and the Biblical period from Abraham to Ezra. He also edited the Anchor Bible, volumes on Jeremiah, Matthew, and Revelation. He is regarded by most archaeologists and scholars as a genius. Albright was a master of so many disciplines linked to the study of the ancient Near East, in particular to the Old Testament era, that he is considered one of the last great Orientalists. Throughout his life, Albright was honored with numerous awards, honorary doctorates, medals, and given the title Worthy One of Jerusalem. the first time the award had been given to a non-Jew. After his death, his legacy continued as a large number of scholars, inspired by his work, became specialists in the areas Albright had pioneered. The American Schools of Oriental Research is now known as the Albright Institute of Archaeological Research, in honor of Albright's exceptional contributions to the field. If you're interested in becoming a student at MBI, please contact MBI at www.graceage.org or contact me directly through my website at www.aaronjudkins.com.